Hey, welcome back to another action-packed edition of Spector Creative where we sit in chairs and talk. That's not action-packed. I don't know what is. So I'm Scott Toy Guru Neitlich, and I'm a big Star Wars fan. Collector of Star Wars, lover of Star Wars, listen to her of the radio drama, and when a new Star Wars movie was announced, when Disney acquired the rights, or rather bought the rights to Star Wars, I was quite excited. At the time, I was working in the toy industry for Mattel. I had had a very blessed and successful career with them, both producing toys, working on toys, and speaking to fans about toys, because what kind of set me apart from your average, toy maker was that I was also a toy collector, so I kind of spoke the language, shall we say. Well, eventually I did make the move from Mattel to JAKKS Pacific when my former director, who had preceded me, called me up and said, "Hey, what do you think about coming to JAKKS? You could be a director, you could make some more money, and you could work on Star Wars." Well, I didn't just work on Star Wars. I was there working on what was called their Big Figs line, which, like the name implies, was a line of giant figures. I do miss a lot of things. I missed a lot about Mattel. I really miss this scarf. This was my favorite scarf, and I have no idea what happened to it. But my time at JAKKS was really cool. I wound up in a very similar sort of publicity role, again, because I could sort of speak collector. Because, again, as I was a collector myself, I knew all the talking points, or at least the emotional things to hit on and talk about to sell toys and explain toys. I worked on brands that were familiar to me, like DC, which I'd done a lot of work at Mattel on, but new brands also came my way. Things like World of Warcraft, the theatrical movie, as well as Nintendo, which I promise I'm going to make a video about my time on Nintendo. I just have to find the right angle or, something unique to talk about. But it will happen, I promise. And obviously, in addition to these, I got to work on Star Wars, which was the big reason that I came over, because I'm a lifelong toy fan, a lifelong collector, which we know is the most important qualification to knowing anything about the toy industry. And getting to work on a line that I actively collect. Well, I didn't collect their Big Figs, but I collected Star Wars. I started collecting Big Figs once I was there. Big Figs is a line that started with 31-inch figures that came out during the early seasons of Clone Wars, which was great because that clone tool could be repainted in lots of different colorful flavors, red, yellow, blue, green, etc. It was a very reusable tool, a high investment. In addition to 31-inch, JAKKS also started doing 20-inch figures and then the giant 48-inch figures that came out for Episode 7. So this was when I joined the company, and I was basically the marketing director in charge of the Episode 7 rollout, which was incredibly exciting. Here I was in charge of a Star Wars toy line rollout. I mean, it wasn't 3 3/4 figures that I'd been collecting, but it was still Star Wars toys. And, without having to move across the country to Pawtucket, just around the corner, this was an amazing opportunity. Yes, I still primarily collect 3 3/4 figures, but Star Wars is Star Wars, and I was so excited for this opportunity. And one of the first things I got to do was go up to LUCASFILM in San Francisco and meet with our counterparts, meet with the different directors and toy managers there. And as a fanboy, it was definitely a dream come true, because every time you turned a corner, you were faced with not just, Star Wars art, but actual props from the movies and props from the classic trilogy, like on-screen used stormtrooper outfits. I mean, to say it was, just a dream come true to tour this place, they had everything. I even had, the Scourge of Carpathia painting that I decided to pose next to. Because, when you're in front of the Scourge of Carpathia, the Sorrow of Moldavia, you have to pose in front of it. I even got to see where the Holy Grail is, and it is in a museum. So Indy was right. It does wind up in a museum. It winds up in the Lucasfilm Archive Museum, but it was prominently displayed on a shelf above some Emmys. Pretty funny, I thought. And yeah, the less said about the giant dinosaur hallway, the better. But, when you walk down a hallway and there's giant dinosaurs on your left and right, you're pretty much a happy toy camper. And one of the cooler parts, though, was the toy room, the conference room where we had our meetings, which was just filled with all of this current Star Wars product from different companies. And here I was, collecting some of this, and there were waves that I didn't have yet, just sitting right there. And I'm like drooling, like, oh my God, I want those vintage figures. They're not out yet. All right. So it did all hit me, like a brick. And obviously, anytime you meet sort of, an idol of yours, and I'm calling Star Wars as a whole an idol, there's definitely some reality check there. And, a lot of times they say don't ever meet your idol because it's going to disappoint you. And there were moments like that. An example, and this is not a Star Wars example, but a Marvel example. I was once at a Marvel meeting where executives said, what we really love about the Punisher is that he sells really well. And that just kind of like broke my heart because I'm like, you have no idea who that character is. You don't even know his name is Frank Castle. You just know his name is the Punisher, and he sells well. And that's an example, not a Star Wars example, but it's sort of what it was like. So it was a little disappointing, a little bit of a reality check, but I will give you some stories because I did learn a lot. So one of the interesting things working on a Star Wars movie line was not everything comes out perfectly. And a great example was the Episode 7 Stormtrooper. And I don't think anyone actually knows about this. But go grab any Episode 7 Stormtrooper that came out for the movie launch. And I don't think they've put out too many since then. But the ones that came out for the movie launch, well, if you look at the reference, or a movie reference, if you will, the Stormtrooper, one of the unique things about the Episode 7 troopers is their feet, the boots on their feet. They are not the same. That each boot is different. One has a strap on top that goes around the side. You can see it here. Well, if you look at any Stormtrooper from any company that came out for Episode 7, and you look at the feet, the boots, compared to what they look like in the actual movie, the toy's backwards. The toy's boots are on in reverse. And this isn't because every single toy company did this, it's because the reference was incorrect. The digital file that was sent out for anyone working on an Episode 7 Stormtrooper received a file that had backwards feet. So the straps are on incorrectly. And you can see this in our Big Fig Stormtrooper that we did in any scale, the 20-inch, the 31-inch, and the 48. And you can see this in any other product. You can see this in kid product. You can see this in collector product. You can even see this in high-end super collector product. Every single one has backward Stormtrooper armor feet. It's because we didn't get to see movie reference, because there was no movie reference. The movie was still being made. And what was provided instead of images from the film, or even still images, or images from the set, because a lot of it was, under wraps and top secret because they didn't want things to leak out, we did get to see some concept art, and it was usually the same concept art that had been shared with fans, but what we had were digital files. And as I said, the digital file for the Episode 7 First Order Stormtrooper, when they put it together, someone made an error at some point, and someone didn't catch it, and the straps around the boots on the armor were on backwards. So that meant every single licensor who was working on a Stormtrooper for the movie, who received the exact same reference files, put it on backwards. So, yep, every single Stormtrooper from Episode 7. And yes, I know this image here is of classic Stormtroopers, but I was having trouble finding an image of like a ton of Episode 7 Stormtroopers, other than the one of me in front of them earlier. So I guess we could show that again, but I'm going to use that in the thumbnail. So, hey, you get to see this one. It was a great Wall of China PR stunt that JAKKS worked on, and it was a lot of fun. Okay, so other things that were really interesting about the experience was the code names. So all of the Star Wars characters could not be referred to by their name in any official communication. And that did provide a bit of a layer of difficulty in the creative process, not just because we had to get used to, that there were too many secrets involved with a Star Wars line, and, nobody wanted to spoil anything, so we all had to keep the secrets, and everything had to be coded. But it sort of left a little mystery of who was who. So this is something that wasn't just exclusive to Episode 7, nor is it something exclusive to Star Wars. Lots of brands do this. Star Wars just kind of did it more, and they did it for all of the Disney movies. And sometimes these names would leak out to collectors, so they would hear about a figure coming out, but they would have no idea who it is because it just says the code name, like in the case of those street or city names. One thing I've seen is they also wind up showing up on shelf a lot on the tags, because the tags have to be done very early. So this Marvel Moon Knight figure was codenamed Twilight, and you can see that his shelf tag says Twilight on it, because when Walgreens buys in on the figure, that was the name. All right. So as far as who could get made in episode 7, well, we knew about the main characters. That was, sort of obvious, but we also didn't know who was going to be the lead. That was a big part of the mystery. Finding out that Ray was the lead was supposed to be, well, it was like the big surprise of seeing the film. And we weren't even told that. We were very much kept, not in the dark, but details were withheld because they were they being Lucasfilm, was very secretive of this fact. One thing that was also embargoed was doing classic characters, so Han and Leia could not be in any of our initial waves. We had to focus on the main characters, Rey, Finn, and Poe got put in the initial wave because he was an X-Wing pilot, and at least that would be recognizable. Finn and Rey maybe, just looked like generic characters, but at least he was in an X-Wing outfit. Jedi Luke, as probably a lot of people know, was heavily restricted to the point that we weren't even confirmed he was going to be in the movie. And of course, when photos of Mark Hamill leaked on the internet of what he looked like, but we still couldn't be given reference, we wound up pinning this picture from the internet on our concept wall, and we just labeled it upcoming figure. So at least we knew what he looked like, and we knew the reference eventually would come. And we actually wound up learning a lot from other leaks, like Hasbro had some figures that leaked, and this helped us in the design process too, because sometimes Hasbro would get more information than we did, because they were a bigger licensor. When it came to the secondary or the tertiary characters, the background aliens, your cantina dudes and all of that, well, there were some characters that Lucasfilm heavily pushed. Luckily, as JAKKS was not the primary licensor the way Hasbro was, JAKKS could kind of get away from this because it was so expensive to tool the big figures that we could really focus on the A-list characters, the stars. We weren't really obligated to do the background aliens, but they did really push certain ones and even tried to get us, JAKKS, to say, hey, we'd really like it if you would do this alien. If you want to know which aliens were the ones that were pushed, basically just look at Hasbro's initial waves for episode 7, because all those figures are the ones that they were basically instructed to do. All the character selection was done by Lucasfilm, not by any of the licensors. We were told, you can do this character. So JAKKS did focus on the main characters, as Hasbro did as well in some things like the Black Series. They didn't have to do all the aliens, but the aliens needed to be out there. And when it came to, non-episode 7 stuff, which is really why I came on board, getting to work on classic trilogy figures, we were still allowed to do some of that, but again, it was really pushed who we were going to do, who was going to be in every wave. Things like Comic-Con were really the only avenue where we were free to kind of express ourselves creatively and with love of Star Wars, and it's why things like this first appearance Boba Fett and the hologram 20-inch Darth Vader figure were produced, because with Comic-Con, because retail wasn't involved, Lucasfilm kind of allowed us to do our own thing. We still had to get approval and everything, and they were great partners. I'm not saying they weren't, but for episode 7, they had a very definitive map of who they wanted out, which wave, which character. It was all very much dictated, and I know from colleagues in the industry that it was like that with every licensor. Hasbro, Sideshow, everybody was basically told the same thing. So my time at JAKKS wasn't exclusively spent on Star Wars. I obviously worked on a lot of brands, and Big Figs itself as a brand involved a lot of different sub-brands, Nintendo being one of them, and it was really cool to work on Zelda product, because I love Zelda. And circling back to Star Wars, I kind of finished my time at JAKKS when Rogue One hit, which was really cool because this was a little bit more classic trilogy. You had those stormtroopers, but again, we were told very, very little. And we're basically said, here are the main characters, and very little about who was going to be the lead, and, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember being at Lucasfilm and asking what outfit Darth Vader was going to wear so we could know if we could re-release the Darth Vader tool we had. And the Lucasfilm people were like, what are you talking about? He has one outfit. And I was like, oh my god, no, he has, lots. They're different in all the movies, especially Empire and A New Hope, and it was a little frustrating on that level, especially as a fan, again, finding out that, you're meeting your idol, if you will. But it was a very, very interesting and rewarding part of my career path, and I'm so glad because it kept me in the toy industry, and I learned so much, and I never once had to sit next to the president of UPS. So it was a great experience, and I'm so glad I had it. If you enjoyed this video, please pass it on to others, repost it. I'm so grateful for Lucasfilm and JAKKS for giving me the opportunity. They were great companies to work for and partner with, and I am so blessed to have had this experience. So I want to pass it on. Thanks for watching.